For my coursework, I chose to create a cover, contents page, and double-page spread for a magazine reporting on the music industry. I decided to base my magazine in the genre of pop punk, and so took a great deal of inspiration from similar magazines such as Kerrang and Rock Sound. Due to this, I also chose to follow many of the conventions these magazines followed, with the hope that my products would look as realistic as possible. For my cover, I followed many of the popular conventions regarding the layout and key features, but I also found that I had to challenge many conventions following the main image in the cover and everything that comprised it, like NVC, lighting, and costume. I think that even though this occurred, it fit the topic that my double-page spread featuring the same model discussed, as it talked about the issue of feminism and gender representation within the music industry, as the image itself went against the stereotypical representation of women, and I saw it fitting as the article itself was about challenging stereotypes that are perpetuated for gender. When taking my cover page photo, I looked to my questionnaire analysis in order to better understand how to approach taking the picture. I also asked my teacher for advice on how to approach this part of the project. The issue here was that many of the covers in pop punk actually prefer to have bands in the cover images rather than focusing on one artist like many other genres. Even though this feature of a cover photo felt unique to pop punk, I eventually decided to challenge the convention and focus on one artist in order for my double-page spread to be more focused and the task of taking the photo itself to be much easier, as variables such as time, model choice, and more were against me during this period. I concluded that arranging a group of people together in order to take pictures for my products would be much more difficult and would require much more planning than taking a picture of one person. The convention that the shot should be a mid-shot, however, was followed, as it was a solo picture, and so there was a greater need to focus solely on her face and outfit. For my contents pictures, I used a variety of different camera shots, different than the cover. For the largest image with the male model, I used a close-up to focus on the statement piece of his outfit, which related to the cover line, and also to focus on his expression. For my own image, I used a close-up shot as well, as this was the conventional camera shot for the editor's image, and for the smaller picture for the Living the Dream article, I used a long shot to focus on her stance and the mic. I chose to go with a female model as I noticed that the male to female ratio in pop punk bands was always multiple men to one woman, and so thought that instead of choosing one man among few, it would be easier to focus on someone who was already different from everyone else, i.e. a woman, and so would have different experiences and perhaps a greater reason behind being solely focused on. As the female model was a girl, I looked at Kerrang's The New Leading Lady of Pop Punk's double-page spread and contents page for my inspiration. My first time taking pictures didn't work out as well as I hoped. This was because even though her outfit followed costume conventions, it limited her ability to stand out and look more noticeable. Such an outfit also put a limit on the message I was trying to send through the photo, and so I opted to change the costume altogether and go for a more appropriate look for the topic of discussion in my main cover line and double-page spread. Due to conflict in scheduling, I also had to end up using a different model who I think better accomplished the expression I was looking for. Her hair was already dyed red, which I think fit really well in with the female representation within pop punk, as many female artists dye their hair in bright colors and so went with the conventional female artist representation in pop punk. For her costume, I went for a more unique look than the previous costume I had planned for the past model, whose photos I had ended up using for my contents page. For the cover model's outfit, I wanted to keep some elements of pop punk, and so went for a bright shirt that was neon pink, which helped connote the bright and vibrant nature of pop punk. But her overall costume definitely challenged conventions, as she didn't wear the normal patterns and costume for a female pop punk artist. However, I believe my costume choice was more effective than the typical outfit and also allowed her to stand out from the cover. I ripped the neon pink shirt to make her look more fierce and empowering, like a good role model for the feminist movement. I suppose it also gave the image that she was determined and would face any obstacle, as it looked like she had been through a fight or battle by her ripped shirt. The black camisole allowed the shirt to stand out by creating contrast and also went nicely with the other black pieces in her outfit, the blazer and jeans. I gave her a blazer to connote ideas of seriousness and also maturity, which could give the audience the impression of how she is towards feminism, serious and mature. Her NVC allowed her to appear confident and open as she tucked her hands into her back pockets, which allowed her to directly face the camera and give direct address. This went well with conventional representation, as many female artists in this genre appear cool and a bit intimidating at times. Her direct address allowed her facial expression to be more impactful and also emphasized her confidence. Overall, in terms of her costume and NVC, I think that I definitely challenged some conventions, especially regarding her costume, but for a more effective and impactful main image. I think her costume also reflected her struggles as being a woman in a man's world, and perhaps reflected her audience as well, as she was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. For the double page spread, I used the same model as on the cover and talked about the main cover line that was on it as well. I made her wear a black camisole which contrasted against her ripped flannel shirt, which was a bit more in line with the conventional pop-punk representation than the cover, as flannel is very popular among pop-punk artists. However, making her shirt appear ripped allowed the same ideas to be given by her neon shirt on the cover to the audience, making her look more fierce and determined. I chose this outfit as it allowed my model to follow conventional representation on the double page spread, where she couldn't really do so on the main cover. I was fine with doing this, as it allowed the graffiti effect I placed on top of her in Photoshop to stand out way more. For my contents page, I used the images I gained from my first model, which I had planned on using for my front cover but had opted against because her costume was too plain, and chose one out of the many to place on it. In this image, she wore a flannel hoodie and ripped jeans, which gave her a tomboyish effect popular among some pop-punk artists, but this may have been more reflective of male representation than female representation. Her NVC allowed her to look passionate when she sang while using the mic as a prop. Her tilted stance made her look like she was really immersed in her performance, and her indirect address emphasized this. For my second largest image on the contents page, I wanted to do something different and fun. Using a male model, I drew inspiration from a Green Day Kerrang! Magazine cover, where they were wearing bright suits that looked a little silly. For my male model, I made him wear a suit and a black sweater underneath on top of a white shirt so they wouldn't contrast against the main piece, the hat. This hat made him look a little silly, which contrasted against his serious expression. I liked this hat because it connoted Alice in Wonderland to me, and so also made him look like he didn't mind looking funny and was cool and laid back, which went with the stereotypical male representation in pop punk. The connotations I got from this hat also helped me come up with a relevant headline so it wouldn't look so random. Max Wright, Mad as a Hatter? Seeing as it was the most unique and different image which made it stand out on the contents page, I chose to make it the main image on the page. I maintained the same color scheme on my cover, contents page, and double page spread in order to keep a sense of continuity in all my pieces. I looked at Blink-182's Kerrang! Cover for inspiration for my final color scheme. My final color scheme was a bright blue, a shocking pink, bright yellow, white, and black. I think this color scheme followed conventions because it was bright and colorful, which reflected the nature of pop punk as well. For my double page spread, I changed the color scheme to only pink, white, and black to better reflect the topic of the article, which was feminism. This, I feel, was appropriate because the conventional color associated with women was pink, and so would be more effective to my audience and relevant to the article. For my fonts on my cover, I used the same font called Kenyan Coffee for all the cover lines beside the main cover line and made them white so they would stand out from the blue background. This followed conventions, as these cover lines are usually white in order to stand out from the colored background. The captions under these cover lines were written in pink font called Anton. I chose to write them in pink so they would also contrast from the background and their corresponding cover lines, but this was actually unconventional, as they usually would be the same color as these cover lines. For the masthead, I used a font that was only unique to it across all of my pieces, in order to follow the conventions for all magazines, not only pop punk ones. The font Electrical was used as it reminded me of Kerrang's in a way. I then applied effects on top of the font, which allowed it to look like there was a gradient from the inside to the borders of the font from pink to purple. This allowed the masthead to follow the color scheme, which I noticed was a convention in most magazines. I also made the masthead one of the largest fonts on the cover and the main cover line as well, which followed the typical convention for all magazines, with the other cover lines being a smaller size and their corresponding captions being even smaller. In pop punk magazines, I noticed that any fonts in the rip above the masthead usually had a bigger font as well, as they typically informed the audience of some special feature. So in this sense, I made the font that said Days From Now yellow and large so it would contrast against the pink background it was on. The font above that read "Win tickets to their next concert" was written in the same font as Days From Now, but it was white and smaller as the name of the band is typically larger than the thing they are mentioned for on the cover. For my contents page, I used the same fonts for the headings of each section and the word contents itself, which was called Virus X, but made contents much larger and in white as opposed to the blue I used for the headings per section, which followed the conventions for fonts in the contents page. For the names of the articles, I used the same font for all of them and kept them in black in order to make them better stand out from the rest of the text. For the corresponding numbers next to the names of the articles, I chose to keep them all in pink, as it allowed for there to be some more variety in the color scheme for the contents page and also allowed page numbers to stand out. The fonts for my double page spread were all carefully considered as well. As the image had the graffiti effect over it, I chose to write the title and the drop cap in a conventional graffiti font, which helped emphasize the connotations of rebellion that the graffiti effect and the topic of the article gave. The title was the largest font on the page, which fit the conventions of a double page spread. The quote and additional banner had the same font, which represented the font of a typewriter, which I chose because I thought it went well with the theme of the double page spread. For my front cover, I followed the conventional layout of a pop-punk magazine in order to make it look as realistic as possible in terms of the layout of the cover lines and the masthead and any extra shape that had any extra information. I definitely didn't have as many images as any other pop-punk magazines, so in that sense, my cover is unconventional. But for my contents, I followed the conventional layout of a Kerrang contents page. I created 3 columns in which I wrote the names of my articles, the headings for each section, and page numbers. For my double page spread, I followed many typical conventions, such as including a fun additional banner, an idea I took from the New Leading Lady of Pop Punk article, including a quote, and writing the article on one side of the DPS. So I thought my double page spread was pretty conventional.